So yeah, Tony and Kim, come on up, make some room. Matt's gonna bring over the beer.
Tony, how you doing? Good to see you. Oh, you sit next to me. Yeah, that's fine.
Just sit out there. I got it.
You want the bowl too?
Oh, yeah.
No.
You can have the bowl.
Okay, thanks.
Bring her a chalice.
Yeah.
The can doesn't need an opener.
Yeah, and you can wake and bake and smoke out of a can.
I'll have to try that.
Dual
When was the last
purpose.
time you smoked out of a bottle?
I see some synergies between you two now.
Yeah.
They say it takes a lot of beer to make good wine. We know what it takes a lot of to make good beer, though. So,
So Dale, you mentioned making some mistakes early on. I mean, I'm sure everybody has some tall tales of mistakes early on. I'm going to ask each of you to sort of explain the biggest mistake that you've made to date and how you've corrected it. We'll start with Kim.
Well, you can imagine people ask this, a version of this question, and my first response is that it's kind of more like death by 1,000 cuts. There's not one thing that's like, that's it, we're headed for the shitter, we're done now. It's more these little bits of this and that are, create issues. But to give a specific one, we were early on in the company. We had just put in the brewery at 350 Linden, which was the railroad freight depot before where we are now. And we'd picked a distributor in Denver, and they ordered a bunch of beer, and we shipped it down there, and I called them the next week and said, so, are you ready for some more beer? And they said, no, we're good. Week 2, so you ready for more? No, we're good. Week 3, no, we're good. It's like, I think I'm driving down there. It was actually week 4 by that time. They hadn't unwrapped a single, hadn't taken the shrink wrap off of a single pallet. And I don't think they ever intended to, actually. So, I called my parents, hello, Mom and Dad, we've got to make payroll. Can I borrow some money from you? Jeff and I lived off of credit cards. And that was probably the closest moment we ever had to tipping the wrong way. But generally for us, it hasn't been a series of moments of really things going badly. It's more just a lot of little stuff, that's you can mitigate it, but it makes you worried.
Do you think these are things that you just sort of had to learn in order to grow up?
Yeah, one was cherries that had been, they had used a little bit of chlorine of some sort or another to make sure that they made them, they were from the Western Slope and an organic place, and they wanted to make sure that they were really clean. Well, chlorine in beer is detectable in parts per billion, so we had to go buy back all of this old cherry beer because it was, it had this funky flavor to it that didn't show up in fermentation or, when we tasted it right off of the line in packaging. There, I bet we could each come up with hundreds of examples of those kinds of things that you learn along the way. That, how would you know that, really? How would you know that they did that?
Tony, what about you? What's your biggest mistake, you think?
on
Besides agreeing to come up here with me and all these guys.
in the very first earliest days, using a garden hose to get the water from into the and it picked up a little hose note, filling the hot liquor tank, and a hose nose isn't on the flavor wheel, you can't find it on there anywhere, and it actually accumulates with time. That would be
Sweet.
So you're not supposed to do that.
No,
No, you're not.
Stop it. Yeah, we stopped and we haven't tried it again. But, it might be something. These days, it might be interesting though. With what people expect from beer.
Band-Aids, hose note.
Yeah.
Dale, how
But-
about you? Big
yeah.
mistake that you can think
Yeah,
back
the
to?
list goes on and on. That's how we've built the company. I mean, I fell into this, like I said, by accident. So yeah, the biggest one, I don't know. I could name a few. 2003, we were still brewing on open fermenters, and we were one at a time. But we landed a Frontier Airlines gig. And back in those days, Frontier was making money, Southwest was making money, no one else was. But you could walk in the front door of Frontier Airlines and talk to Jeff Potter. And so we walked in one day, threw a can of beer down his desk, and we want to sell you beer. And he loved that. So we started selling beer to Frontier Airlines, and we were like, oh shit, we don't know how to sell beer to Frontier Airlines. I mean, we didn't have a delivery vehicle. So I mean, it was. This thing happened, and I took a flight to Atlanta just so I could have one of my beers on Frontier Airlines. And I was going to go down there, see your buddy, and turn around, sit down, ask for a Dale's Pale Ale, and I pour the beer, and it comes out like motor oil. And I'm sitting there thinking,
Yikes.
Planes are evil. There's some pressure thing going on. I mean, we had no idea. We actually called Peter. I mean, we were trying to figure out, and this was our first kind of
It's our
quality
brewmaster.
control, and Baby Jesus, that's what we call him.
I've never heard of
No,
Baby
they call him
Jesus,
Baby
but I'm gonna
Jesus.
start.
He will know where that came
Yeah.
from. So so I have to choke this thing down, and we get back, and so that was our first round of quality control. Of, how did this thing? Well, it ended up being a protein that didn't completely. Get through the, this was back when our boiler, our
Makes that ropey.
Yeah, and our kettle was a wooden box then, and we could get our beer almost up to lukewarm. We could hardly get a boil. So that was the first challenge, but, loading up truckloads of beer that, our first truckload that went to Savannah, Georgia, was going to fulfill the Atlanta market. It was 20 pallets of beer, and we'd hand canned each and every one of them, and I had touched every can. And it was our biggest sale, and the last pallet that went on, last two pallets, I noticed a little leaking thing around the edge, and beers were leaking. So we started pulling pallets off, and every can on those 20 pallets, $40,000 worth of beer, and we weren't doing $40,000 in revenue. I mean, that was and that was a moment of this might be it. Wow. So, other than but you tend to if you grow through these mistakes and bottlenecks that you create, you turn them into opportunities, and that's what built our company. So.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are all definitely still here to tell the tall tales of the mistakes, and so you guys have done something right, obviously. And it's funny that you mention Frontier Airlines as an avenue to sell beer, and that's starting to come around again. There's a lot of craft brewers looking at opportunities on airplanes, or we heard it earlier today, ballparks, and just different new retail opportunities. What are some of the ways that you guys are exploring new opportunities that maybe weren't there 10 years ago? Which ones are you seeing out there?
Come on, tell me.
I want to, yeah.
I've got somebody on a hotline right now.
I want to take a slightly different tack, which is, not because of that. One of the things I've noticed recently is that with the larger, like the Safeways and the Krogers and those groups, where it used to be, I said when I was speaking with you that we were in Kansas, and then of course we were in Missouri because the way the chain footprint was set up, we had to be in both places. That is not so true anymore, and we're hearing chains saying, bring new ideas, let's do some crazy things together, and anyone who's been working with Safeway or the Kroger team for a while knows that this is really new news with them. So that's not, obviously there are other new kinds of opportunities. I would say that with the big brewers, Yeah, I was at a BA board meeting earlier this week, and there were several brewers there who were talking about being shut out of some of those venues that you hope to get, ballparks, sports venues. That seems to be a place, because they're so focused on, sports dollars, that they're really trying to make sure that they keep craft brewers out of, and that the beers that are offered there are what I would describe, we've heard people use several different terms, as faux craft.
Right. Well, speaking of faux craft, the emergence of some of these brands like Shock Top or Blue Moon, do you think that's good or bad for the overall beer business? You guys have an opinion on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's great. I mean, relating that to the last question, we're constantly looking for places to sell more beer, and I'm not afraid to. We hear from our distribution channels a lot that that's not the right place for your beer, but we're seeing that's growing, these convenience channels, especially. We want to. We've always said we'll go to a rock fight, we'll go to a divorce, we want to sell beer, and if the demand isn't there, and then let's create it, and so we're hedging that risk to create opportunity, and some of the beers that you mentioned, they're the gateway, and now I can talk to you because I know that you're at least thinking outside of the box a little bit. So
yeah.
Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, same thing. It's just giving big brewery customers permission to leave the reservation. And once they leave, I don't think they're going back anytime real soon. Mm-hmm. There's backroom stuff that those brands can be used for to kind of curtail some access to retail and such. But that's you can't stop the tide for very long. So, but it does bring a lot of customers to the table.
I would agree from the sheer math standpoint. There's no way that collectively we have enough capacity to meet the demand of all of the people who want to drink our beers. I think we will continue to see issues with focus at the distribution level. And I think as we gain more prominence, that will become more evident than it is now. And I also think that there are, I think it's something to be attentive to. I agree, though, that it also brings people into the category, and we can't satisfy that demand, so it's great that there are people who can.
Now, obviously, Blue Moon and Shock Top, they're competitors. They're bringing people into the category and hopefully testing out faux craft, whatever you want to call it, and then moving on to your brands, leaving the reservation, as you say. But there is, a certain idea of competitiveness, and even some competitiveness amongst all the craft brewers. You guys are all fighting for shelf space. It is a community, but you guys at some point will have to let the gloves come off. So my question is, have the gloves come off, and are you seeing competition amongst yourselves?
I think when you ask one of the challenges, or what do I fear? That could certainly be a problem that arises over the next few years. I think our challenge is that we kind of owe it to ourselves to continue to operate and create the friendly environment that got us here. My first experience with craft beer, my second experience with craft beer was with Kim. My first was with Pete's Wicked Ale. I drive to Atlanta and get it from Auburn, and then I moved to Colorado in '92, and Kim sold me my first Fat Tire T-shirt, in an old train station. And it's those things are important, and I think that we owe it to the next generation of 10,000 brewers that are opening up breweries next year, that we create a foundation that...
it's 20,000.
Is it 20,000? It was 10 yesterday.
Yeah.
That we got here for a reason, and there's not this faux or false camaraderie. I mean, we're competitors. We're healthy competitors, and I think it's important that we stay healthy competitors. My brewing staff is at New Belgium tomorrow. and walking through their can line, and there's 8 guys going up. And I think when that door closes, and when New Belgium or I can't offer help to someone else wanting to get into cans, and that door closes, then the gloves are off, and then I'm off doing something else. So I think we're all very fortunate and very lucky. I feel extremely lucky to be in the spot that I'm in, because 2002, 2003, it was luck. I mean, I can't, I took a little risk, but I got lucky. And I owe it to everyone in our organization to, grow and learn. And so can we all be friends?
Are we all still friends?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Tony, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah. Well, I come from a little different part of the country. It's almost like we're in 2 different countries. Craft in the Pacific Northwest down to San Francisco is a completely different state in a lot of ways than every other market that I visit around the country, which are growing, and there's all this enthusiasm. There's a lot of, things are growing certainly where we're at, but they're growing a little differently, and they're more mature markets where there's lots and lots of, robust breweries. They're playing ball in those markets, and certainly from all over the country, breweries come from the east to sell on the West Coast for the tourism reasons and all sorts of other things, and so the behavior in the trade is often a little bit different. But geez, out here, I say out here as if like this side of Denver and Boulder and Fort Collins, this is a just open field running for everybody, and it's a really good time. It reminds me of the way San Francisco was like in the very earliest part of the 90s,
I spend a lot of time in Seattle, and Dick Cantwell is my boyfriend, and so I see a lot of interaction between brewers in Seattle. And I'm actually really impressed with how collegial they are with one another. There's not that, I think they do even more than we do in Colorado. I agree with you. It's absolutely essential. We're in the 10 minutes of pleasure in every bottle business. And if our customers feel like this is a cat fight or, people being crappy with one another, that's not aspirational. That's not what they're interested in. And I think it's really important. It's the beer business. We are the luckiest people on earth. Mm-hmm. And if we can't, yes, resources will get scarcer, both talent, hops, you look at the forum any day of the week, but, you name it, resources will get scarcer. But I think it's really incumbent on us to, raise appreciation and affection and camaraderie and information sharing as sort of central to who we are, because who wants to be in an industry where, it's scratching eyeballs out? I don't want to do that. That's not the kind of energy that I want to live in.
It's positive energy, and it's one of the reasons that people are so attracted to this industry, and it's why it's growing. If you discount that as not being a reason why people are wanting to be a part of it, a lot of our companies were built around this sole little thing. We're going to make beer just for us, and we're going to have fun doing it, and if anybody else wants it, then so be it. And that was a lot of the beginnings. And people are drawn to that.
That's why you can call the baby Jesus and ask him advice.
I know and that's important. And not only because you can hear from people that know more than you do, and they can teach you. It is people are drawn to that energy, and I'm drawn to it, and I'm still in this business
Me too.
because it's still fun, And if it were cutthroat and I had to deal with a bunch of BS, that it might just tip the scale.
Now, I would be completely remiss if I didn't ask each of you about your expansions. For Tony, you're in Chicago, but basically this idea of a bi-coastal business model now. Talk a little bit about each of your sort of strategies behind adding a second brewing facility in another location, clear across the country. Why you guys are doing it and how it's going, really.
I just got back from Chicago yesterday. You know, construction's underway and things are starting to move. Permits are happening, licensing. It's kind of interesting, you know. It's going to be a fabulous thing. And Chicago is just a market that's ready to just come unglued. I think there's 15 breweries going to be opening in the city limits in the next 12 months, you know. So it's a birth there in every way. It's going to be a cool thing. And the great thing about having a second facility, several things. To get all the diesel out of the beer, I figured there's 2 ounces of diesel in a 12-ounce bottle, and if you go all the way to New York, it's almost 4 ounces before it gets there. And if the ingredient was actually in the beer, of course, you would never ever drink it. So we get that out of the bottle, and not only that, we put it right there in the middle of an enormous kind of a transportation hub for servicing the rest of the country, and then we get to have just a fabulous relationship with the whole of the upper Midwest and sort of spreading out of the eastern seaboard. It's going to be great. You know, and for me, it's going back home. I mean, that's where I was born, so it's kind of nice to be doing that.
For you guys in North Carolina?
I'm just carrying Kim's bags and Colorado. So
yeah. We're praying that Frontier Airlines will get a direct flight.
Yeah.
Maybe because we both sell beer there,
Right.
we'll be able to make that happen.
No, people ask it. I'm sure all of us ask me all the time. You know, how is it that all 3 of these breweries, you know, manage to be in the same area? And if you've ever spent any time in Western North Carolina, the answer's right there. And it's why we got into this business. It's a quality of life move, and you know, I've had a friend who's been trying to get me to open a brew pub in Brevard, North Carolina for 16, 17 years. And the quality of life, I've got 4 small kids, and I didn't want to sacrifice the travel. But as we're at capacity at our brewery in Longmont, you know, you just start doing the math. I mean, it was a simple, pretty quick, do the math.
Yeah.
And
The brewery pays for itself.
Yeah, the brewery pays for itself in a very short period of time. And we're fortunate that we're in an industry where, you know, I mean, we turn our inventory 16, 17 times a year, and you know, these tanks pay for themselves real quick. And when you're spending, you know, a great deal of your money on transportation costs, and you factor that into, you know, new brewery on the East Coast, and you get to enjoy, you know, some of the being in that area, and it actually improves your quality of life. For us, it was creating another small brewery in another part of the country, because we just built a brewery, you know, in 2008. And so our model was, instead of going out and buying a $250,000, you know, $5 million brew house, why don't we just spend $5 million and build an entire new brewery, you know, and build the same one that we have right here. There's no the learning curve is
you already know how it goes together.
You're
Isn't
right.
it funny?
And we bought all of the same equipment. We're still in touch with all the vendors. All the guys that put that equipment together on our end know how to use it, and they just purchased it. So our hope is that it's
Seamless.
Seamless, and we'll just, you know, start doing IV bags off canning, you know, lines there. So
Does that go off the canning line, bottling line? How does that work?
I can't tell you.
Yeah, I don't know that I have. There was one thing I wanted to add to that. Tony, I think you're right. A piece of it too is being able to have that marketplace presence in another area. Oh, I know what it was. For us, another piece of it is we are at terminal capacity with our brew houses. So we needed to do something anyway. And when you start to try to sandwich that into an existing brewery, things get to be really inefficient, you know, because you've got the mechanical systems for utilities over here, and now you're doing long runs or you're doing substations there, and it just, I mean, that was a secondary reason. The primary reason was the freight. I'm not sure if I'd describe it as diesel in a bottle, but so that was the first reason. The second reason was to be able to have a brand presence in another place and to sort of do that whole business role model thing that's important to New Belgium somewhere else. But the third one was that adding on was just going to be clunky. It was not going to be, you know, something that we could feel was a really great addition. So,
Is this a business model that you can see being replicated even at a smaller level?
Can I answer? on the level that we're at, we're pretty small. You know, after I had this enormous epiphany, you know, and yeah, I mean, it makes the same sense for the same reason for you. The brewery's almost free when you really take the freight and just put it towards bank debt instead. But it's like after I thought I was so smart, and I kind of realized the economics behind it one day driving into work, and and I thought, well, there's this Fairfield Budweiser plant right down the street. Let's see, they're a 100 million barrel brewery, and this is only a 3 million barrel plant. My God, they're already doing it. I mean, we're reinventing the wheel here
Sure,
in a lot of
totally.
ways, you know.
One thing that I think is an interesting, I was on this kick a few years ago, and we haven't figured out how to do it, but one of the things that I would like to see craft brewers consider is how do you do that in a cooperative way? Because I was at a Beer Institute meeting in Milwaukee once, and I'm walking by all of these breweries, the Schlitz Brewery, there were a couple of others that had been shuttered right in downtown Milwaukee. And it's like these monuments to German, you know, pride in brewing heritage that are no longer in existence. And it seems like if anyone can figure out how to make a kind of cooperative system work, it would be craft brewers. And I'd like to see, my hope is, I've had that conversation with a few people, my hope is that we can figure that out, because the basic process has its own flavor for each brewer. But I don't know, I think there's something to be said for trying to figure out how we can spread brewing across the land, be closer to customers, without each one of us having to have our own gig in every single instance.
I'll can some fat tire. I'll can
Okay.
the shit out of some fat tire.
Except we're within 30 miles of each other in both of our brewery locations, so.
Well, it's certainly an interesting business model, and you know it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I mean that very well could be the future. It's like that way in many other industries where there's manufacturing that happens at only a handful of places for a number of different products. So, you know, it certainly wouldn't be a surprise to see it happen in craft beer as well. Thank you guys. I think everybody else probably wants to enjoy a beverage as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.